Nothing was broken, nothing was slow, and yet nobody trusted it. Imagine you're sitting in a room, right? You're reviewing a digital product that has absolutely every feature your roadmap promised. I mean, it tested incredibly well in isolation, it checks all the boxes, but when you finally put it in front of real users, they hesitate at every single step. Why is that? Well, that contradiction is exactly what we're going to be unpacking today. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're exploring some genuinely profound insights from Vinay Vijay Raut's analysis on product and design systems. Specifically, we're zeroing in on the invisible layer of digital products, what he calls the grid nobody sees. Our goal today? To fundamentally change how you think about building, evaluating, and actually interacting with digital interfaces. Okay, let's dive into this. We'll start with the illusion of good UI, then look at how design acts as a silent promise. After that, we'll hit the 5 checkpoints of trust, walk through a real-world case study, and wrap up with how to audit your next release. Kicking things off with Section 1, the illusion of good UI. So it's time to dismantle some really common misconceptions about standard design checklists. The author points out this fascinating realization. Picture this. Usability sessions were going strong. The color palette, perfectly on brand. The typography was clean, the icons were remarkably consistent. I mean, by every standard checklist metric out there, this product was a shining example of good design. But when they watched people use it in their actual workflow, completely unprompted, something deeply concerning showed up. People paused before clicking. They were double-checking actions they'd already confirmed and rereading labels they really should have trusted the first time. The failure wasn't actually on the screen itself. It was happening in the gaps between the user's decisions. When we see that kind of hesitation, it's so easy to just assume the interface needs a quick visual tweak. But hesitation is actually a huge tell. It's not a visual problem at all. It is a deep trust problem wearing a visual disguise. Think about what most teams optimize for. Spacing, color contrast, font pairing, those are necessary for sure. Nobody wants an ugly app, but they are absolutely not sufficient. The core problem is really about predictability. It all comes down to whether the interface behaves the way the user's mental model expects it to, every single time, without exception. Moving right along to Section 2, design as a silent promise. This brings us to a massive paradigm shift in how we need to view digital products. So, the crucial point is this. Design isn't decoration. It is a series of promises. Literally every single visual element in a product is making a silent commitment to the user about its behavior. A button that looks clickable, it's promising an action. A field that looks editable promises it'll actually accept your input. A progress bar promises the system is moving toward a goal. And when that visual promise and the actual behavior don't match up, trust doesn't just disappear overnight. Instead, it erodes quietly and cumulatively, click by click. Which leads us to a highly contrarian truth in the design world. A beautifully designed screen that behaves inconsistently will always, and I mean absolutely always, lose to a plain screen that behaves exactly as promised. Users don't actually remember your interface, right? They remember whether they could trust it, and this is exactly why so many flashy visual redesigns totally fail. They don't fail because they look worse. They fail because they completely break the silent promises the old design had already established, and nobody bothered to audit what those promises were before changing the visuals. That brings us to Section 3. The 5 checkpoints of trust. To prevent those broken promises, we obviously need a way to measure them. The author provides a highly tangible framework here called the promise model. It breaks down into 5 overarching elements: legibility, predictability, feedback, recoverability, and hierarchy. We're going to unpack the most vital ones right now so you can understand exactly how to audit those silent promises yourself. What's really interesting here is how we frame predictability. Ask yourself, does an element behave the exact same way everywhere it appears? Consistency is not just a style preference to make things look pretty. It's the strict, structural foundation of how a user actually builds a working mental model of your product. If an element acts one way on the home screen and a totally different way in the settings menu, well, you've just broken their mental model. And worse, you've broken their trust. Then there is feedback. Does the system acknowledge every single action within 200 milliseconds, even if the real result takes much longer to process? This is huge because silence reads as failure. Let that sink in for a second. It does not read as patience. It reads as a completely broken system. If a user clicks and nothing happens visually for even half a second, they just assume they're clicked and register, and that trust instantly starts to leak. Let's jump into Section 4, solving the real problem. Okay, let's move from theory to practice with a really fascinating field observation. The author was actually advising on a fintech product that was saddled with this stubborn checkout drop-off rate, stuck at around 34% for 2 entire quarters. Naturally, the design team's first instinct was totally visual. Simplify the form, use fewer fields, create a cleaner layout, maybe pick a friendlier font, but absolutely none of it moved that 34% metric. Not one bit. The real issue only surfaced when they finally stopped looking at aesthetics and mapped the flow against that promise model. Here was the actual culprit. The Confirm Payment button looked identically active in both its ready and its disabled states. Because of this, users were tapping a button that simply wasn't functionally ready yet. They were getting zero feedback. And remember, silence reads as failure, so they were just abandoning the checkout entirely, assuming the whole product was broken. And this brilliantly illustrates our core concept. The fix for this massive business problem was absolutely not a grand redesign. It was just a single state change and a feedback signal. By simply making the disabled state look different and ensuring the button actually reacted when tapped, that drop-off plummeted by 11 points in just 3 weeks. That is the true power of keeping your visual promises. Which leads us to our final section, Section 5, Auditing Your Next Release. This is where we get highly actionable. Before your next design review, I want you to stop asking your team, hey, does this look good? Instead, you really need to ask, what promise does this element make? And does the product keep it every time in every state? The Interface Trust Audit Framework allows you to score your screens across legibility, predictability, feedback, recoverability, and hierarchy. Try auditing your 5 highest traffic screens using this. You will almost always find that the trust leak isn't where the visual complaints are loudest, it's hiding in a quiet, overlooked state. Like a loading spinner with no timeout or a disabled button that looks fully enabled. To make this even easier, here's the first half of a really handy 8-point checklist to run before you ship. Number 1. Every clickable element actually looks clickable, and static elements never borrow that same visual language. 2. Every single action gets a response within 200 milliseconds. 3. Disabled states are visually distinct, and no, not just a slightly lighter shade of gray. And 4. Errors actually explain what happened and what the user should do next, never just a frustrating dead end saying something went wrong. Every single pixel here is a strict commitment. All right, here is the second half of that checklist. 5. The same component behaves identically everywhere. 6. One primary action per screen is visually dominant. 7. Destructive actions are either completely recoverable or they require very deliberate confirmation. And 8, which is perhaps the most revealing of all, you've tested the product in absolute silence, meaning you watch someone use it unprompted without you standing there narrating what they should click. The teams that build genuinely intuitive products don't just have good taste. They are the teams that audit their promises just as rigorously as they audit their codebase. Ultimately, an interface is not just a surface you decorate. It's a set of promises that you are accountable for keeping, click after click. The highest compliment a product can receive really isn't, wow, this looks beautiful. It's that nobody mentions the interface at all. A truly successful interface does exactly what is expected every single time, and it simply gets out of the user's way. Which brings us to a final thought to leave you with today. I want you to think about your daily digital life, the tools you use for work, or the apps on your phone right now. What is one interface that broke your trust in a way that absolutely no amount of visual polish could ever fix? Keep that in mind the next time you're building or evaluating the grid nobody sees. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer.